podcast about product management, user experience design, technology, and more. This is Product by Design. All right, welcome to another episode of Product by Design. I am Kyle Evans, and today we've got another awesome guest with us, Florian Daniel. Welcome to the show, Florian.
Hi, glad to be here.
All right, so let me introduce you really quick. We're super happy to have you. Florian is the co-founder of a company called Carployee, which is an Austrian-based startup that was acquired by RideAmigos, where he is now the technical research lead. So Florian, again, welcome to the podcast. And why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your experience?
Hi again. Totally. So what I do at Carployee and now RideAmigos, as you just said, technical research lead. Maybe I start with how one becomes a technical research lead. It goes without saying, when you come from the startup industry, you just kind of slip into it and you fill the gaps and do what needs to be done to make the company successful. That's also kind of what I guess happened to me. I have a background in software development and product development from my school and studies, but I also have some experience in like business, informatics, and management and law, that kind of stuff. So that's basically my educational background. And I tried and played around a little bit with consulting and internet governance and that kind of space, so more the formal regulatory space. Yeah, I noticed very quickly that that's not to my liking. And I'm more like the hands-on approach of like trying to build a product, trying to get people to use a product, trying to figure out how we can make it better, how we can make people happier using it, how can we get the most value out of it. And that's how I basically decided my path forward, I would say, and move into Carployee and RideAmigos.
Awesome. So before we dive into a little bit more about your experience and kind of what brought you to all of that, outside of all of that, the startup and the research, what else do you like to do?
Yeah, so outside is a limited space. No, of course, I always try to keep a healthy work-life balance. Yeah, I like to spend time outside. My colleagues would say it's not enough. I need to get sportier. So I try to be a little bit sporty, but it's not too much about passion. It's more about conscious and like knowing that it's healthy for my body. I'm a really big fan of League of Legends esports. So I watch that and I play the game. On the other side, I don't watch soccer or football or any other of the mainstream sports. And I guess like a lot of people, I'm very interested in the cryptocurrency and crypto technology space. That's like twofold. Of course, it's an investment opportunity, but also like from the software development perspective, it's really interesting playing around with the things and seeing how they can be like better or not so good compared to traditional software development approaches.
Very interesting. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I just wanted to round it up with politics. I love to talk to people and argue with people. That's maybe also why I'm in this podcast right now. It's really just fun to pick people's brain on how they think and what they think.
Very cool. On the esports, you mentioned watching it. Do you participate in some of the tournaments or some of the other things? Do you do like broadcasting yourself on some of those, or is it more just kind of like more casual participation?
I would say it's more a casual participation, mainly because of my skill level.
Yeah. Nice. And then, are you participating actively in, any crypto or NFT projects, or is it, are you kind of diving into that at the moment?
Actually not. So not like privately. I'm not engaged in any development efforts, I would say. But as Carployee and RideAmigos, we might be sooner than later, but maybe more on that in a little while.
Very interesting. Yeah, no, it's a fascinating space, and I've been actively involved in a number of ways over the last little bit as well. So I'm excited about it. I think there's a ton of potential there, and I'm excited for obviously a lot of new space and a lot to learn in all of that with the cryptocurrencies and NFTs, and we'll probably all make a lot of mistakes as in the space, but as it matures, I'm excited for it. I think ton of cool potential there. Awesome. Well, getting back to some of your journey and some of the, I guess, startup specific experience, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what brought you specifically into your current work, and I guess more specifically into the commuting space with Carployee and then RideAmigos. What kind of focused you specifically in that area?
Yeah, that's an interesting story, actually. So I'm not one of the original founders of Carployee. So I joined Carployee like 1 year after it got founded by 3 friends of mine that I already knew from Austria. And I could very much identify with what Carployee was trying to do, which is reducing the number of people that are commuting alone in their car. So really focused on the car and bringing that to the B2B space with employees. So that's also where the name comes from. I'm living in a town called Linz. It has like around, I think 200 to 300,000 inhabitants. And if you live outside of Linz, usually you go through a comparably big traffic jam for the region to get to your workplace. I have a lot of friends and family members that do that every day, Monday through Friday, and it's a pain. You waste so much of your precious lifetime sitting in the car alone, and it's bad. It's basically bad for you. It's bad for your family. It's bad for the money that you have because it costs a lot of money, and it's also bad for the environment, of course. So that's kind of how it was very obvious to move into or help Carployee become successful. So that's where I started working with the team as the first employee, and we tried to bring it to employers in Upper Austria and in Austria. So that's where I moved into the commuting space, basically. But with Carployee, we focused really only on the car, and with the acquisition by RideAmigos, we now for commuting how people come to the workplace and how people move from A to B. The worst option is the car. So we're happy if people take the transit, bike, or walk. But now it's really about, or we focus our work on how we can get people to actually switch their mode. So maybe they switch from the car to a carpool, which is great because that saves us 1, 2, maybe even 3 cars on the road. But how awesome would it be if people would switch from the car to the public transit, or switch from the car to the bike? Because there are a lot of people that commute within the city in a bikeable distance, but they just don't feel comfortable enough doing it, or never got used to it because our society is so focused around cars. A lot in Austria and Germany with the big car manufacturers, but in the USA, of course, as well. So that's where we are right now in the commuting space. And that's what we try to do with what we call Pave Commute, which is our newest app that tries to do that by applying behavioral science in the commuting space.
Interesting. I think this is such a fascinating thing for me, because I agree with you that the car centricity of so much of what we do is so deeply ingrained in so many of our cultures. Maybe not every culture, but like you said, certainly a lot in the United States and Austria and Germany, in probably many other places as well. The idea of commuting to work. I guess a couple questions that I wanted to kind of pull on with that. First off, you kind of mentioned that success for you really looks like the transition to other types of things. So reducing the rides. Is that ultimately what success looks like for you, for your software, for the solution that you're trying to do, or does it go beyond that?
That's an interesting question, I would say. If you would ask the business development team, I guess success looks like the active users per month count, and that's what it's about. No, what I would say it's about getting people at first to move away from the car, so trying a more sustainable commute. But it's not only about trying it, but actually changing the behavior of people in the long term. So while we are really happy if people continue to use our app, it's more about people changing their behavior and tracking that behavior change with our app. So we want to try to be that nudge that makes them change the behavior. But true success is when we have a sustainable, like a measurable and feelable impact on the workforce, I would say. So if you think about like an example company with a couple hundred employees, and 90% of them use the car to get to work and back home. So let's say we have 100 employees and we need 90 parking spaces to have them basically park and allow them to park and get to work. And if we can get even 20 people to switch to a more sustainable commute, and then we imagine the space that 20 parking lots require, even if you build them tiny, you can place a couple of trees, make a nice green area, put something to sit there, and suddenly the place at the workplace looks way nicer and is more enjoyable. And I feel like that's what it's about. Like a commute that you don't do with your car is usually more enjoyable because riding your bike is more fun. In transit or in the bus or in the tube, you can work or you can read, but in the car you just sit there and you have to control the car, which is, I would say, a mediocre experience.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense and really brings a lot of possibilities to mind, both in what you can do with the commute itself, but then also what you can do at the end of that commute, like you said, with the parking lot and the savings there, and what can be done, potentially with the transition away from having to have all of these cars in a place and then move them from offices to homes and back and forth and things like that. Fascinating stuff. The next thing that comes to mind for me is the pandemic. Obviously a lot of people have started working more remotely during the pandemic, but a lot of people have not. What have you seen both during and post pandemic as far as commuting and ride sharing go?
I mean, I guess it's globally the same. Once the pandemic hit, we have basically gone to zero commuting for a period of time, which was great for the environment, right? But of course, very frustrating for us at home, being stuck at home and in flats that are not suitable or have never been designed for us to work from home. So during the height of the pandemic, we've of course seen reduced usage of our services, but not really something that we worried about at all, because it's a great trend. Like we love that people do more flexible approaches, but as we see it now already, also from bigger companies and also smaller, more like a hybrid approach is establishing itself, where you do 2 or 3 home office days, and then the other days you go to the actual office, if you still have one. So we focus on these days, which cause the same problem. And if you think about roads and highways, and we think about now we have all this infrastructure and gigantic highways within cities, and now we don't use them Monday through Friday, but only 2 days a week because people commute less. We have a gigantic waste of space in the cities. So I guess there is a lot of challenges resulting from people changing how they commute and when they commute. It also requires our products to become more flexible, which is from the product of thinking perspective, a whole new challenge, because suddenly home office is a big topic. So that's very interesting for us. But of course, we've also seen we have a big customer in Austria. They produce cars, and we have seen that they cannot switch to home office, right? The factory workers, industry workers, they still need to go to the factories. And for them, our product continue to deliver the same service, and we also need to think about them and how we can facilitate them the best.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I think about a lot is as I've looked around, especially, during and post pandemic, that, one, there continue to be many roles, like you mentioned, that involve commuting. And, that's something that will continue, manufacturing and service related roles that, you can't do remotely, like many of our roles that can be done, from home offices. But then also the roads and infrastructure that we have, how it's been built out in this car and commute centric mentality. And how does that change going forward, and how can it change, and how should it change going forward, given the both the continued growth, but also the need to just think differently about how we approach it and how we approach commuting and how we approach more sustainability. And so that's super fascinating things, because for me, it's, I don't know, we continue to see, and this is something like locally, continue to see like new roads being built. And it always irks me, because it's like, why can't we think more creatively about how we can solve these problems when it's kind of like you're doing, when it's ride sharing for commuting, as opposed to, just we build more roads like we've always done, when there are so many better potential solutions versus, the same solution that we've always had in the past. Anyway.
Oh yeah, and these new roads, basically, you can think of as nudges from the other side, right? So while we try to nudge users to move away from the car, this pretty new road or intersection that got built is like a devil on one's shoulder saying, let's try that, let's ride the car again because it's now faster. And so many people get triggered by that, and then you build a new road and it's jammed right away. And if you think about how much road and car infrastructure costs, if you could use that money to reward people to not take their car, you could get so much money you could make money by riding your bike or riding public transit instead of paying for it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So, as we've talked, you are the lead researcher for RideAmigos. And, we've talked about the value of research, and it's a super important thing in product development and software development. How do you approach research in your role, and from a software and product development standpoint, both early on and then as you continue to develop the features and the parts of the application to ensure that you're creating the right thing?
In my role as technical research lead, I perceive myself as like the bridge between the core software development team, which I'm also part of still, and business development and sales and basically company growth team, if you can name it that. So basically more the business people. And it's an interesting challenge because from the business perspective, a research grant and research, or basically research that involves a research grant, which is most often the case, especially for smaller companies like we are one, where you secure some funding to actually do the research, is always very interesting because you get cash. Sometimes you get it up front. Maybe it's a cheap loan. So there are business interests in pushing research. It delivers this big and easy promise of building your USP because it's research and you invest in new technology, which is mostly also true. So at Carployee, we used and we continue to use research to build our USP and to have the opportunity and the resources to work with researchers from universities and not build everything from scratch with just some ideation phases within the company. So it's a great opportunity to get additional and external help on tricky problems. But it's also a very slippery slope because very big corporations have the luxury of having dedicated research teams. So they just run in their silos. They do long-term research, short-term research. And if something doesn't work out, it's discarded. And if something works out, great. You can find it a couple of years later in the main product lineup. If you're a startup, you don't have a research team. You have your core team. The only team is like 5 people, for example. And if you dedicate yourself to a research project, that's, for example, 2 years of time that you need to invest. This is mostly an all or nothing thing. So you have to make sure that the research that you do is benefiting your idea, your mission, and your vision of the startup. So from a startup perspective, there is like the clear advantage. Research is a funding opportunity for a startup. It's a good selling point for potential clients, but also for potential investors. But on the other side, you always need to carefully evaluate how much further does it bring you on your road. So basically, if you go your road towards fulfilling your mission, how much along the way does it bring you? and how much does it bring you away, basically sidetracks you, because maybe in a year or half a year, you are in the process of revisiting your idea because you notice the market is not responding too well, which is very, very common and very, very normal for startups.
Yep.
But if you have committed yourself to a research proposal with a university and maybe one or two other companies, it's a different challenge. And that's what I try to navigate day to day, because there is a lot of opportunity and thankfully a lot of great partners out there that you want to collaborate with, but you have to be very picky on what you do and where you say, no, thank you. This sounds great. This might be a good funding opportunity. The idea is very interesting, but it's just not suitable or it's just not manageable with the resources that we have at the moment. So very distinct advantages, very distinct disadvantages.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I'm always curious, especially going from early startups to different stages of startup, and being part of the founding team at Carployee, and then moving into RideAmigos, which still very much a startup. What have been some of the things that you have learned early on, either at Carployee or with RideAmigos, that have kind of influenced some of the decisions that you make in your role?
So I guess one of the bigger ones is sales-driven development versus product-driven development. If you have very energetic salespeople, what you usually want to have, right? You want to have people that go out there that sell the product, that are enthusiastic about it. They get a lot of feedback, of course, as well. And maybe sometimes it's just a little bit of this, or a little bit of that for a customer to sign a contract. So they all try to bring the product team to build that. But this directly conflicts with you actually having an idea of how the product should look like in the future, because you're not joining a big corporation, you're building a startup. You have a clear picture, or sometimes you have a clear picture, sometimes you have no clue. But sometimes you have a clear picture of how it should look like, and then you need to decide, is this really relevant for what we want to achieve in the long term? Is this a customer that we want to secure because we believe that's a representative customer compared to the market that we look like? So maybe their idea or their feature wish is very common, or is actually just flat out something that's better, how they think about the problem compared to how we have thought about the problem. But it's really something that needs to be carefully evaluated when you touch the core product for a single customer. So I guess that's the main point, is sales-driven development versus product-driven development.
Yeah, I feel like that's an ongoing theme, especially in early stages of both products and companies, is finding the right balance of that, because it can be a very, very difficult thing. And frankly, probably at all stages of companies, making sure that the product is not too far along that path of a sales-driven development, because while we always love our sales teams and the work that they do, and obviously like we wouldn't have products and companies without, like, a lot of times without our sales teams going out there, we most of the time can't be completely beholden to like just what sales needs in order to like make the next deal. And so finding the right balance it can be tricky. But it's just super, super important in making those decisions on either being sales led or product led, or, finding the right place in all of that. That's a good thought. Something that we've been debating a lot recently in many of the things that we've been working on is the quick iterations versus how polished we make something. And we were actually just having a huge debate on this, because there are trade-offs with both approaches. Getting something out quickly versus making sure to kind of polish it and get it out in more of a final state. What are your thoughts on that, and the dilemma of getting something out quickly versus getting it out more slowly but a little bit more finished?
I guess you first need to define what's finished and what's polished. I've heard people say, yeah, we do the polish in the end. And that can mean a lot of things, because when you say you do the polish in the end or before the deadline, it mostly means polish does not happen. because you're behind schedule. So now it's the question: what did you not have time to polish? And it's, I think, if you basically skipped an entire thing, like for example, you skipped your entire UX UI approach, how you actually want to have users use what you've built, then that's not polished. It's just flat out not finished, and you cannot ship this to production. If you know that there are some bugs in what you have built and they can occur when, I don't know, the moon is shining. Usually, sometimes you have bugs where you have no clue where they're coming from and how they're happening, but you know that they are there. I guess it's totally fine to ship and don't worry about it. Overall, what we also have done and continue to do, because we started on the very, very safe side with being testing everything. In every release, we tested everything, even features that we didn't touch, because there is always the risk of some interference with new features or existing code bases. So we started with that approach, and we're still moving towards ship faster and ship a little more, I would say, not so well tested. I don't want to say broken, not so well tested code. So what we try to do is we try to ship faster. That means we need to rely more. And as a startup, that's of course also a challenge. And the time investment, we need to rely more on continuous delivery and continuous integration. So we need to make sure that we can ship everything as fast as possible. And then we rely heavily on bug detection in production. So we use multiple tools for the front end and for the back end. So we have two front ends, a mobile app and a web app, and the back end, which the two front end apps share. And we rely heavily on detecting bugs and then trying to fix them as fast as possible. And I think that's a fine approach. So of course, sometimes you get then customers that are not happy, users that are not happy because something doesn't work. But that's why we always also focus massively on support. So we try to reply as fast as possible, give context to what actually happened, and not assume that the user doesn't know, but assume that the user can be educated on what's happening in basically behind the scenes and why something did not happen. And then on the B2B side, we rely on our great customer success people that talk to our how do you say in English? They basically talk to the company and to the responsible people in the company that bought our products and services, to make sure that they have somebody to talk to, and everybody knows why this error occurred and that we are in the process of fixing it. And I think as long as you do that and you're not a black box to the people or to the users and customers that you work with, it's fine to ship fast to production and then fix after.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's always one of those things that it kind of depends, and finding the right balance of how do we do this in the right way in order to both get out there quickly, but do it in a way that is helping more than it's hurting, both helping customers and users and helping the business more than it's potentially hurting anybody. So I appreciate that. What has been the most exciting thing for you as you've grown and scaled both Carployees, and then as you've been acquired and helped grow and scale RideAmigos?
I guess it's just from the software developer experience, and it's just how you build a feature and you think like, oh, this is a nice piece of code, and you're really happy about it, and you have integration tests and you have unit tests and you're really happy about it, and then you get a couple users on the platform, and more concurrent users, which is always an issue. And then you see stuff break all around you. And sometimes you wake up. So we have users in the US and we have users in Europe. So that means, and the core development team sits in Austria. So that means you wake up in the morning and you wake up to hellfire, because you have many messages and you have bug reports and you have seen that the app crashed and stuff like that. And I mean, it now sounds like it's a not really bad experience, but it's also really exciting because it's a learning process of just accepting that the stuff that you build is not meant to last forever. So the code base that you basically implement once you start your startup is not the one that's going to last very long, because as you scale and you get more people, the stuff that you wrote will be replaced even faster. And that's I think the very exciting thing to see from the software development experience. I guess from the product experience. It's really just about how wrong you can be in how you design your app and how you design your user experience. We have gone, and commuting is a very complex space. So it's because we talked in the beginning about crypto, like a crypto exchange or a wallet where you manage your funds is very simple. It has very simple user stories, how you can use it and what are the things that you can do. A commuting app is one of the most complex things that I've ever seen in my life because commuters are very individual. They have very distinct expectations on their commute. And we need to try to support all of them. And then you try to figure it out, and you will always find users and user segments that are just not happy with how you designed it and how this is supposed or how this is behaving, because they have completely different expectations. And it's great to see, because that means that there is room to grow and room to improve.
Yeah, no, that's super, super interesting. And I'm interested, going along those same lines, like what you see next coming for your app, your company, and then also the market and industry, as far as, commuting and specifically sustainable commuting. What is coming down the pike?
So I guess for the market and for the industry of commuting, it's a lot about regulations. To be honest, it's just, and thankfully, so from my personal perspective, thankfully, states and governments are waking up to the fact that commuting and just the climate crisis is a big issue and they need to take action. So we'll see more regulations in the commuting space as well that impacts employers and employees as well, of course. Hopefully it's more regulations on the employer side, forcing employers to give better options and better choices to the employees and not punishing people that try to get to the workplace, but rather trying to find a solution with employers, how we can make commutes more sustainable. That's, of course, great news for us whenever that happens. I get that it's not happy news for everybody, but I think the regulation space is something that's going to ramp up rapidly over the next couple of years, just because there is no way around it. With all the nudging that we do, while big roads and highways are continue to be built, there is not a whole lot that we can do to influence the overall climate crisis. And then from the industry space, I would say far out, or maybe not so far, it's autonomous driving. It really depends on how the tech is going in that regard. We're not in that space. In the USA and in LA, I've seen a lot of cars driving around, but we also hear about crashes and issues with them. So I hope that they are not too far out, because this allows a whole new era of optimization, also in the commuting space, because you can just fill up the cars and you finally go away from people owning their car to shared mobility. So that's a great one. And then now coming down to our company and RideAmigos, what's up for Pave Commute. So our behavioral science app is moving this on the blockchain. So what we have been struggling with in the past has been issues where there are so many stakeholders involved in the commute. It's the employer, it's the regional government, it's the local government, it's the federal government, it's the transit agencies. So it's literally everybody. It's shopping centers. Everybody has an interest in how people commute because and where they stop their commute and where they end their commute, and how flexible they are to go after work to the shopping center, for example. And it's a challenge bringing all of that stakeholders to the same table. And we perceive a very great chance in blockchain technology to accomplishing that. And that's where it's going next, or hopefully going next for Pave Commute.
Super fascinating. Well, I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see all of those changes, because that sounds, one, like it's very, very needed over the next little while, and two, like it's going to be super fascinating stuff to see. So I'm excited. Well, before we get to kind of our last wrap up questions, I'll ask you for any final thoughts that you have on anything that we've talked about, or anything that maybe we didn't get to talk about.
I guess we talked about a lot. That I just want to use the opportunity to whoever's listening, try to get on a bike, try to get into a bus or a tube or public transit. Try to skip on your car. It's not gonna cry in your garage. Try to make your commute more sustainable, and we love to see that.
Yeah. So good. Could not agree more. That's awesome. All right. Well, I guess a couple wrap up questions for you as we kind of end this with our kind of our shout outs and gripes here at the end. But have you read or watched or listened to anything recently that you found interesting or would like to share?
I read a book recently that really influenced or still influencing me a lot. It's called Humankind: A Hopeful History. It's written by Rutger Bergman. He's a Dutch historian, not too old. When you think about historians, you usually think about older people, I think, but not too old. And it's really just, so why it's so interesting to me, I don't want to spoil the book, but in the business world, it's very much, it continues to be the main idea that it's about competition and that you compete against each other. And that means that that you think about as other people that they want to maybe hurt you, that they are not wishing you the very best because they always look on their own advantage. And Humankind: A Hopeful History is about how nice are people, basically how nice are people from the roots up. And Rutger Bergman looks at the history and also the present. And I think he paints a very beautiful picture of how people are in general. And that's influencing me a lot, how I try to treat people. Because I now start to just be more positive about people and say like, this person wants me the best, so I will try to do the best for them.
Awesome. Well, that sounds good. I haven't read that one yet, so I'll have to check that one out. We'll put it on the list. Cool. And I guess finally, any products that you are using or have used that you've either enjoyed or have not?
So I've brought one that I enjoyed and one that I haven't enjoyed.
Yes.
One that I haven't enjoyed that everybody knows, and maybe I get some support, is Mac OS. I perceive the operating system as a shame, and I struggle with it daily. Is it crashes? Is it fan control? Or is it, this is very nerdy, I know, fan control, or is it Bluetooth? So many issues with the operating system. It feels like it's Ubuntu from 2010. I really hope they clean that up. It's really a pain for me, and that's really that I struggle with daily. That's something that I have. Sorry.
Oh, I was gonna ask, is there an operating system that you prefer?
Oh, I haven't used Windows in quite a while because when you do app development, you're forced to use a Mac to deploy your iOS apps. So I cannot really say. I feel like that any other operating system is probably better at this point.
Ooh, I love it. All right, there you go. Fighting words for Mac OS. Love it.
Oh yeah, and then a product that I have really liked using because it's a startup with a great journey where I can see how the product has improved over the last months and weeks and years. It's really awesome to see. Is Blockpit. It's a recurring theme. It's a crypto tax solution that helps you managing your taxes. At least for Austria, Germany, I think also in the US and a couple other countries already, because it's a really intransparent thing, right? And you don't want to be in the legal side of things. Yep. And they have great product people because their product has improved massively over the past months. And it's so delightful to see when there is something that has been bothering you for a while now, and suddenly it's fixed or they change the behavior and you don't need to think about it. It just works. And I think, Blockbit does a great job with that.
Blockbit. Okay. I have to check that one out too. I'll say too, in my experience so far, the rate of change of a lot of the blockchain and crypto technology is just massive. We've been using some products as well, like integrating with third-party tools and things like that. And they are moving so rapidly to improve things in so many places that it over the course of just weeks and months, like products are just improving so quickly. It's awesome to see. I love it. So, all right. Shout out to Blockpit then. I'll have to check that one out as well.
Definitely.
Cool. All right. Well, Florian, this has been an awesome and very, very fun conversation. I really appreciate it. Where can people go to find out more about you, the things that you're working on, your company, anything else?
I guess the best would be to go on pavecommute.app. Pavecommute.app. That's all about our new product. Me, you can find on LinkedIn, I guess, is the best. Florian Daniel, and just send me a request. You can also send me an email, but I guess emails are not a thing anymore.
Awesome. Well, we'll put that in the show notes as well. The links to all of that. And again, thank you so much for joining us. It has been a very, very awesome conversation and a real pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you everybody for listening. So we'll see you again next time. Thanks again for listening. If you like the show, be sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can follow the show on Twitter at prod_by_design. That's prod_by_design. You can follow me at Kyle Larry Evans on Twitter as well. If you want more product conversation, check out my newsletter, Product Thinking, at productthinking.cc. You can follow me on Medium at Kyle Larry Evans as well, or check out my Medium publication, Product by Design. Thanks again.